Hey everybody, and welcome back to Autumn Leigh at Home. I'm Autumn Leigh. Today we are trying a new recipe and I'm going to make sourdough everything bagels. So please follow along with me. I went ahead and got started last night and I'll take you back to that time frame.
This recipe only calls for 5 ingredients. That's half a cup of sourdough starter that is bubbly and active, and I will explain that in just a moment. 1 cup of water, 2 tablespoons of honey, 2 teaspoons of salt, and 4 cups of unbleached all-purpose flour. I did make a little bit of an adjustment to this recipe, and instead of using unbleached all-purpose flour, I used unbleached bread flour that has more gluten and is specifically used for baking. I also doubled this recipe. So instead of doing half a cup of sourdough starter, I did 1 cup. I did 2 cups of water, 4 tablespoons of honey, 4 teaspoons of salt, and it calls for 4 cups of flour. And again, I used bread flour. However, in the recipe, they mentioned that you want to start off with 3 and then try to add the 4th one in. So that means that when I doubled the recipe, I would be doing 6 to 8 cups of flour. I started off with 6. I was able to easily get 7 cups of flour in this. However, later on you will see I was not able to get that very last cup of flour, and that is perfectly acceptable and completely fine. And I can tell you now that the bagels turned out fantastic. Now back to the sourdough. I am not a master at sourdough. However, I am learning with you guys, and this is something that we are learning together. And I have been having so much fun learning new recipes for not just sourdough, but also sourdough discard. And this recipe was one in particular that I was actually really nervous to try just because it involved boiling the bagels and then cooking them. And once I finally did it, I realized how easy it was, and that this is a recipe that you could totally do while cleaning your kitchen or doing other things, that it's not one that you necessarily have to babysit. It's just one that you have to learn and practice. And sometimes that can be the hardest part, is the unknown and just taking that extra step to do it. But once you learn to do this, and this is with baking in general, on Farmhouse on Boone, she said that this was a very dense dough and that if you allowed it to rest, then you could maybe add some more flour into it. So currently I've put about 6.5 cups. The recipe called for 6 to 8 cups, but she said the more flour you could get in it, the better, because you want this to be a more dense dough. So I have another half cup-ish, maybe a little less than that here, which would make 7 cups. So I'm gonna let this rest and then try to add a little bit more flour. If I don't make it to the full 8 cups, that is okay. I just want to try to add as much as I can in there. So we're gonna let it rest, and I'll come back in maybe 15-30 minutes and see what it looks like and add a little bit more. It's been a little time. I didn't wait super long because it's getting kind of late. So I'm gonna go ahead and add a little bit more flour. And I wanted to give my mixer time to kind of cool down a little bit too, which it's cooled down some. This is a very old mixer. I was gifted it for free by a friend, and that friend was very special. So I'm really grateful that I get to, continue making memories with it. I've added a total of 7 cups of flour, and that's the bread flour that is unbleached. I went ahead and turned my mixer off just because I was kind of afraid. Ooh, sorry, that was kind of loud. I was kind of afraid that it wouldn't actually survive if I kept it going, that it wouldn't last. This dough is just very thick, and she mentioned that on the Farmhouse on Boone video, that it's just a very dense dough, but that's what you want. So I went ahead and took it off. I'm gonna place it in this bowl over here and let it rise in this bowl overnight and cover it. You want to make sure it doesn't dry out. So I'm going to get some aluminum foil and cover it. See how dense? It's fully incorporated, so we know that there's no loose dough or anything like that. So we know it's perfectly fine and good to go. It is very dense. I can feel it, but I'm going to lay it down in here and make sure I cover this with aluminum foil so that it doesn't dry out overnight. Now that it's covered, I'm going to
sit it in a warm place overnight and let it rise.
I know I kind of mentioned Farmhouse on Boone earlier, so this is Lisa's recipe from Farmhouse on Boone. She has a YouTube channel. I will link that video in the description down below if you would like to watch hers as well, just for extra practice. This is the next day, and the night before we were able to get all of our ingredients mixed up and put into a warm place in a bowl to rest and rise. Now it is time to shape our dough, cut it into smaller pieces, and shape it into the bagel shape. This is the fun part where it gets a little bit messy, but also so much fun getting to work with the dough and using your hands to do it. These bagels, we love bagels at our house. We love anything bread. We actually have to kind of control ourselves and not bake anything too much because it will get eaten at our house. And I know that all bread items are not healthy. However, anything that you can bake at home that is not store-bought is a win in my book because it's at least healthier than the store-bought version of it. So bagels are one of those things that we can eat them for breakfast, we can make them for lunch and use them as sandwiches. They're just very versatile, and I plan to freeze these, and I will let you guys know how they turned out as far as unfreezing them. If they freeze well, I would like to freeze them so that I can make big batches at one time and be able to enjoy them for an extended period of time. Because I doubled this recipe, the original recipe would make about 8 bagels. So I just take the dough and I just keep halving it until I get 16 pieces. That's the easiest way for me to do it rather than trying to measure out or do all those things. If you want to pull a scale out and try to measure them out, you are welcome to. This is just the easiest way for me. Just keep halving the balls of dough until you get to 16 pieces. If you want smaller bagels, you can half them again and you'll end up with a lot more. Once you have your dough divided into 16 pieces, or 8 if you're doing the original recipe, you want to try to take the dough and kind of shape it into a ball, and then you're going to take your thumb and push and break a hole through the center and then shape them into a ring shape. She just pushed her thumb through the dough and just left it that way. I kind of stretched mine out a little bit more and was able to make a really good bagel shape, and it held its shape really well doing it that way. I also didn't find that it messed up the rise or anything else because this dough again is a very dense dough, so you're not wanting to be careful that you're going to lose the bubbles in the middle of the dough or anything. It's okay to shape it. I did spray some parchment paper with nonstick spray. However, when I went to my original intentions were to use the same tray after boiling them, I would put them back on the same tray. And then I got nervous when I actually went to go do it that I would mess up the ones that I hadn't put in the boiling water yet. So I ended up getting another tray and spraying some parchment paper and just using that. So I ended up not really necessarily needing to spray this, but I will say it made it nice and easier for transfer to allow them to rise and sit them somewhere warm.
I have finished rolling them out into the, I want them to slip off, into the dough shape, the bagel shape. And now all I have to do is I'm gonna put a wet or moist paper towel on them to help them keep them from drying out. And then I'm gonna put them in the warmest place I can think of, which is on top of my stove. And in about 30 minutes, I'll start preheating the stove. And we want to let these rise for at least an hour, but they're looking good. And once an hour passes, what I can do is start boiling and getting some water boiling. And then I want to add 2 tablespoons of baking soda and 2 tablespoons of brown sugar. We will then boil these, put them in for about 1 or 2 minutes on each side, and then flip them. So another 1 or 2 minutes on the other side, take them out, put them back on this parchment paper, and then they'll be ready to go in the oven.
After about 30 minutes of my bagels sitting on the stove warming up, I decided to go ahead and get my pot of water ready and let it start coming up to a boil. Sometimes that can be the hardest part, is just kind of the watch and wait, especially when something's new. And this is the part I was talking about, where once you know and you're familiar with the recipe, you could easily do other things in the kitchen, other things in the same room, while all these other steps are kind of happening. The letting the dough rise, the waiting for the water to boil, all of those things. It's easy to just kind of get it ready and then walk away. Obviously, not too far away because you don't want to leave boiling water unattended. However, I could wash dishes, clean the kitchen, do other things while this is happening. And because I'm somewhat on a time crunch, I wanted to make sure that the water was ready and boiling by the time my bagels were done rising after an hour. So about 30 minutes in, I went ahead and got my water, my 2 tablespoons of baking soda, and my 2 tablespoons of homemade brown sugar. If you have never made your own homemade brown sugar, you are missing out. It is the best and easiest thing to make in the entire world. It's literally every cup of white sugar, you add 1 tablespoon of molasses and you mix it in the mixer, and it stays nice and fluffy and it's really good. It stays much better shelf stable for a lot longer than the store-bought version, and the taste is phenomenal. So we went ahead and put both of those into the water. I'm letting it come up to a boil, stirring it occasionally because I don't want the brown sugar to stick to the bottom. And then here you see me getting out my other pan and parchment paper, spraying the parchment paper with nonstick spray. You can use a little bit of oil if you would rather. And now I'm kind of just setting the stage, getting everything ready, including the everything bagel seasoning, or the everything seasoning I'm putting on a plate to make it easily accessible. And then while doing this, I decided I wanted to try cheddar bagels too. I just thought that my kids, I wasn't really sure which one they would like more. I know I love everything seasoning, but I don't think that they have ever actually tried it. And I wanted them to be able to enjoy this as well. So I went ahead and got cheddar out too, and put shredded cheddar on a plate and everything seasoning on another one, and just had fun with the flavors. You could try other seasonings if you want to.
It is time to get started boiling them. So that is our next step. I have my boiling water here that I added the ingredients to. My bagels have been rising for over an hour now, and I am about to have to go pick up my kids, so I'm hoping I can get this step done before I leave. I will put them finished here. I've already sprayed it with nonstick spray, so make sure you do that, because once you take them from the boiling water and put them on your parchment, they're going to get really sticky as you bake them. So you want to make sure you have a good, at least oil it or spray it with some sort of nonstick spray. I have all what is it called? Everything bagels, or everything seasoning here. And then I also have some cheddar cheese. I wanted to try a little bit of both and see which one we liked more. So I got both, and we will see how this goes. I've never done this before, so this is the part I'm a little nervous about.
The reason I'm so nervous about this part is because in the past I made apple fritters and I was using oil, and I just didn't realize how hot the oil had gotten, and I almost burned my house down. So I know this is just boiling water, but it gives me flashes back to that.
My dough sunk, which is not a good sign. I think it's supposed to be floating. So let me show you what I'm talking about. See how it's on the bottom? I think technically it's supposed to be floating right now. Oh, there it goes. I guess maybe that's just how it does in the beginning. And we're gonna let it cook on one side for 1 to 2 minutes, and then I will flip it over.
Rest assured, these bagels turned out phenomenal. They were fantastic. So, no worries with the dough sinking to the bottom and then floating to the top. I think that that's just how it's supposed to be. And if I'm wrong, definitely put it in the comments below. But if you see that with your dough, don't panic, because the bagels just keep going. The bagels actually turn out great later on. And I was able to put all of them in there. All the dough did the same thing. It would sink to the bottom. And then after cooking for 30 seconds or so, it would float to the top. I'd let it cook for 1 to 2 minutes on one side, flip it over, cook it for another 1 to 2 minutes, and then take it out and put it on the parchment paper.
I believe these are ready to take out. because this water isn't quite fully boiling, I went ahead and did both sides 2 minutes. That way I made sure that they got decently finished cooking how they're supposed to. They look pretty good. I was kind of afraid that I didn't let them rise long enough, but I let them rise over an hour. It's just our house is pretty cool. So I'm sure I probably could have let them go a little bit longer. And I think the first 8 I'm gonna put cheddar cheese on. The ones I'm looking most forward to are actually the everything bagels. Alrighty. And you can see, here, let me show you. When you first put them in, they sink, and you can see that they start to float right there. And then the others will probably pop up here in a second as well. While these are cooking, I'm gonna go ahead and put the cheese on these before they get too dry. Because I want the water and brown sugar mixture with the baking soda, I want that to help me allow it to stick a little bit easier so it doesn't just easily come off. Some people use milk and brush milk onto these to allow it to stick a little easier, but I know in the recipe that we're following, she said that just the brown sugar mixture water that they come out with allows it to stick a little easier. My presentation definitely could have been a little better. The top looks okay, but the bottom looks a little rough. I did not finish in time to go get my kids. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and put these in the oven, allow them to bake really quick while I get my other daughter up to go pick my kids up. And when I come back, I will leave this on the stove, but I turned it off so that it's not continuing to boil. I don't want it on while I'm gone. So I went ahead and turned it off, and this will be done and out before I leave. Then when I get back, I will finish the everything bagels, which are the ones I'm looking most forward to. We will get those boiled and then in the oven as well. So I will be right back soon.
To bake the bagels, I set my oven to 425 degrees. The recipe said to allow them to bake for 20 to 25 minutes. However, mine were finished at 15 minutes. So just make sure you keep a close eye on them. I think it all depends on your oven as well as how big your bagels are. I think there's just different factors involved. And my oven in particular, these were done within 15 minutes and were starting to almost burn on top, and I didn't want that to happen. I did cut into them. They were completely cooked on the inside. So I think my oven just cooked them faster, and that is completely fine. Just set your timer for a little bit earlier than you would think they're done. My kids were very excited when they got home from school and realized that I had baked another bread item. They just always love coming home to the smell of bread, and they always know that that means there's something delicious on the counter waiting for them, and they couldn't wait to try it. So we went ahead and cut it open and decided to split one amongst ourselves. They absolutely loved the cheddar one, but now it was time to get back started on making the everything bagels as well. If you are new to sourdough baking, biggest tip that I think I could give you guys is that find a routine. A sourdough starter can be scary at first just because you have to feed it and discard it so many times and trying to keep it active. Once you have an established sourdough starter, just know that the hard part is in the beginning when you're trying to establish it. Once it's established, I usually put mine in the refrigerator and only pull it out about once a week and use it maybe once a week to refresh it, but also to bake all of these goodies. So know that the beginning can be kind of hard and you're wondering, how am I going to be able to keep this up? I'm having to feed it 1 to 2 times a day, discard it 1 to 2 times a day. I usually kept a discard jar in my fridge. Once I dumped the discard from my sourdough starter into the discard jar, I would put it back in the fridge and use that jar once it got full to make sourdough discard waffles or things like that at least once a week. So just find that routine that works for you. Find the amount that works for you for the sourdough starter. A quart jar is a great amount for us. We are able to use that amount easily in 1 week. Any more than that would just be too much. So find a routine that works for you. I kind of got my kitchen cleaned back up, and then my last bagel batch, the everything bagels, were finished. I was able to take them out of the oven. Again, I only had them in there for about 15 minutes, and as you can tell, they were very brown on top. I was nervous I was bringing them out too early, but they ended up being perfect. So I'm glad I didn't wait any longer because I think they would have burned. And this was the perfect time to bring them out. They were golden and brown and beautiful, and they tasted fantastic. The smell was amazing. It smelled like a bakery or like a bagel shop, either one of those, but both of these bagels turned out wonderful. I didn't think my kids would like the everything bagels, but they ended up loving those too. They have already eaten all of these, and I did try to save a few and put them in the freezer because I want to eat some with some cream cheese once I can get it from the store. But other than that, we are really enjoying this bagel recipe. I will definitely be making this again in the future, and I would strongly recommend it because it was very simple, a lot easier than I thought it was going to be, and much easier than apple fritters, which is the one that I had a hard time with. But I would recommend this. I hope you guys enjoy it just as much as we did.
I just want to take this time to say thank you so much for joining me here at Autumn Leigh at Home. Please like, subscribe, and share down below, and I hope to see you guys next time.